The black Mercedes crept to a stop at the edge of the ravine. 5 armed men dragged a bound police officer and her K9 partner into the mouth of an abandoned mine shaft. They stacked dry timber around them in a crude circle, dousing it with accelerant until the air reeked of gasoline. One of them struck a match. The flame caught and began to dance. 30 seconds before that fire became a pyre, Caleb Harlan crouched in the darkness above them, watching every move. He had sworn never to fight again. Yet here he was, weaponless, without backup, without a plan. Only his retired combat dog, Phantom, pressed against his side. The thugs had no idea death was watching them from the shadows. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and stay with this story until the very end. Drop a comment with your city. We want to see how far this message of courage and justice reaches around the world. Caleb Harlan heard the scream before he smelled the smoke. It wasn't loud. It was worse. The hoarse, broken sound of someone who had screamed for hours until her voice finally surrendered. A rasping, wounded thing that crawled through the pines like a dying animal searching for a place to rest. Phantom stopped walking. Caleb stopped breathing for 3 heartbeats. Neither moved. The wind moved through the trees above them, cold and indifferent. Then the sound came again, not a scream this time, but a word. Caleb couldn't make it out, but he recognized the shape of it. He had heard that shape in Afghanistan, in Syria, in places where hope went to die. It was the shape of someone begging. "Easy," Caleb whispered, to Phantom, to himself, to the night. "Easy." Phantom's ears locked forward, body rigid in the posture that meant one thing: threat detected, awaiting orders. Caleb's hand found Phantom's collar, not to restrain him, but to anchor himself. "Don't do this," a voice in his head warned. "You came here to disappear. You came here to stop being the man who runs toward trouble." But his feet were already moving. 20 minutes earlier, Caleb had been sitting on the porch of his rented cabin, watching the last light bleed from the Montana sky, trying to remember what peace felt like. It had been 4 months since the mission in Yemen. 4 months since he'd held Martinez's hand while the medic worked and watched the light leave his best friend's eyes. 4 months since he'd stood in a military cemetery and realized no amount of training could teach him how to bury the people he loved. The Navy called it mandatory leave. His commanding officer called it necessary recovery time. Caleb called it exile. They didn't want him on active duty until someone with letters after their name signed a paper saying his head was screwed on right. So here he was, Blackwater Ridge, Montana, population too small to matter, a cabin at the edge of nowhere, a dog who understood him better than any human ever had, and enough silence to drown in. Phantom had been lying at his feet, chin on paws, watching the tree line with the patient vigilance of a soldier who never learned how to stand down. The dog was 6 years old now, ancient in combat years. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his left hind leg during their 3rd deployment, ending his official career. But Phantom didn't know he was retired. His eyes still swept every room for exits. His ears still tracked sounds Caleb couldn't hear. His body still coiled at shadows that moved wrong. They were the same, Caleb thought. 2 broken weapons pretending to be at rest. "What do you say, buddy?" Caleb had asked, scratching behind Phantom's ear. "One more walk before dark?" Phantom's tail swept the porch boards once, ready. They took the eastern trail, the one that wound along the ridge and dropped toward the old mining tunnels. Caleb liked that trail because no one else used it. Locals said the mines were haunted, not by ghosts, but by bad luck. 3 miners had died in a collapse back in the 50s. The company sealed it and walked away. Now it was just another scar on the mountain, forgotten by everyone except the wind. Caleb understood forgotten scars. They had been walking for 30 minutes when the first scream reached them. Now Caleb moved through the darkness with Phantom at his heel, both falling into the old rhythm without discussion. Step, pause, listen. Step, pause, listen. The forest pressed close, branches snagging at Caleb's jacket like hands trying to hold him back. "Turn around," the voice in his head insisted. "This isn't your fight. You're not that man anymore." But he was still wearing his NWU Type 3. The navy working uniform he'd pulled on that morning without thinking. The digital camouflage pattern of green and brown made him a shadow among shadows. He told himself it was just comfortable, familiar. But standing here now, heart pounding, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge, he knew the truth. He had never stopped being a soldier. He had only stopped admitting it. The smell hit next. Smoke, oil, and something chemical. Accelerant, his brain supplied automatically. Someone was planning a fire. A big one. Phantom's hackles rose. Caleb dropped to a crouch, pulling the dog close. "What do you see, boy?" Phantom's nose worked the air, cataloguing information Caleb could only guess at. Then the dog's head turned, fixing on a point 200 meters ahead where the ridge dropped into a ravine. Caleb followed his gaze and saw it. The faintest orange glow bleeding through the trees, firelight coming from below. Another sound reached them. Not a scream this time, but voices. Male, multiple. And beneath them, barely audible, a woman's voice speaking in a low, steady rhythm. Caleb's blood went cold. He knew that rhythm. He had heard it from dying soldiers, from hostages about to be executed, from people who had accepted that help wasn't coming and were making peace with whatever waited on the other side. She was praying. Caleb found the cave entrance 5 minutes later, hidden behind a tumble of boulders and dead timber. The orange glow was stronger here, spilling from the mouth of the tunnel like the earth itself was bleeding light. He pressed his back against cold stone and listened. "Told you she'd break eventually," a man's voice, rough and amused. "She hasn't broken," a different voice, colder, more controlled. "She's just stopped fighting. There's a difference." "Does it matter? Dead is dead." A sharp laugh. "Poetry, Vance. Real poetry." Caleb's jaw tightened. He counted voices. 2 so far, but the echo suggested a larger space inside, which meant there could be more. Phantom pressed against his leg. Caleb felt the dog's muscles trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. Phantom wanted in. Every fiber of his training was screaming at him to move, to engage, to protect. But he held position because Caleb hadn't given the signal. Good boy, Caleb thought, just a little longer. He edged closer to the entrance, keeping his body flat against the rock. The glow brightened as he moved, and now he could see shapes moving inside, silhouettes against firelight, 4 or 5 of them. And then he saw her, a woman in a torn police uniform, hands bound behind her back, kneeling in front of a massive pile of firewood. Her dark hair had come loose and hung in matted clumps around her face. Blood crusted at her temple. Her badge still hung from her chest, catching the firelight like a small, defiant star. Beside her, also bound, lay a Belgian Malinois. The dog's muzzle was wrapped with wire, but his eyes were open, fixed on his handler with the desperate intensity of a partner who couldn't understand why he couldn't help her. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. "Walk away," the voice screamed. "You don't know these people. You don't owe them anything. Walk away and forget you ever saw this." But his body wouldn't move. Couldn't move. Because he had walked away before. Not from something like this, but from other things. Smaller things. Moments when he'd chosen the easy path and hated himself afterward. And he had promised himself, standing over Martinez's grave, that he was done choosing easy. The cold voice spoke again, and this time Caleb placed it. The man standing closest to the woman, arms crossed, watching her with the detached interest of someone examining an insect before crushing it. "Officer Voss," the man said. "Lauren, can I call you Lauren?" The woman, Lauren, didn't look up. Her lips kept moving in that silent prayer. "I'm going to take that as a yes." The man crouched in front of her, and Caleb caught a glimpse of his face in the firelight. Shaved head, scar running from ear to chin, eyes like chips of winter ice. "Here's what's going to happen, Lauren. In about 10 minutes, my associates are going to light that pile of wood behind you. It's been soaked in accelerant, so it's going to burn fast and hot. By morning, there won't be enough left of you or your dog to fill a shoebox." Lauren's prayer faltered, just for a second, then it resumed, steadier than before. "But it doesn't have to go that way." The man reached out and lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You found something you weren't supposed to find. You filed a report you weren't supposed to file. But reports can be unfiled. Evidence can disappear. All I need from you is a name, the person you told. Give me that name, and I'll make this quick. Painless even. Professional courtesy. Cop to cop. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Cop to cop. This man was law enforcement, or used to be. Lauren spoke for the first time, and her voice was steadier than Caleb expected. Stronger. I didn't tell anyone. Lauren, I didn't tell anyone because I wasn't sure who to trust. She pulled her chin free from his grip. Turns out I was right not to trust anyone. The man stood, sighing like a disappointed teacher. That's unfortunate, truly. He turned to the others. Vance wants this done before midnight. Light it up. One of the men, younger, nervous, holding a torch that had already been lit, stepped forward. What about the dog? What about it? He's a police canine. There will be questions. The scarred man shrugged. There will be ashes. Ashes don't answer questions. The young man with the torch hesitated. Caleb could see the conflict on his face, the war between obedience and something that might have once been conscience. Then he stepped toward the woodpile, and Caleb made his decision. Phantom felt the change before Caleb moved. The dog's body shifted from alert to ready, muscles coiling like springs waiting to release. Caleb's hand dropped to Phantom's collar, and he leaned close to the dog's ear. On my signal, he breathed. Controlled engagement. No kills unless necessary. Phantom's eyes never left the cave entrance. He understood. He always understood. Caleb scanned the interior one more time, counting, calculating. 5 men total. The scarred leader clearly in charge. The nervous kid with the torch. 3 others spread around the cave. Relaxed, confident, not expecting trouble. No visible long guns, but at least 2 of them had holstered pistols. Bad odds, terrible odds really. But Caleb had faced worse. He reached down and picked up a fist-sized rock from the ground near his feet, weighed it in his palm. Then he wound up and threw it deep into the trees on the opposite side of the cave entrance. The crash echoed through the forest like a gunshot. Every head in the cave turned. What the hell was that? The nervous kid nearly dropped his torch. Probably a deer, but the scarred man was already drawing his weapon, scanning the tree line. Vance, check it out. One of the thugs, Vance apparently, pulled a flashlight and started toward the entrance, toward Caleb. Come on, Caleb thought, just a little closer. Vance stepped out of the cave, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He swept left, then right, then Caleb's arm wrapped around his throat from behind. The chokehold was precise, cutting off blood to the brain without crushing the windpipe. Vance struggled for maybe 4 seconds before going limp. Caleb lowered him silently to the ground and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse strong. He'd wake up with a headache. But he'd wake up. 1 down, 4 to go. Vance! The scarred man's voice echoed from inside. Report! Silence. Vance! Caleb heard footsteps, another one coming to investigate. He pressed himself against the rock wall and waited. The second man was smarter than Vance. He came out with his weapon drawn, moving in a tactical crouch, checking corners. Military training maybe, or law enforcement. But he wasn't expecting a German shepherd. Phantom hit him low and fast, 70 pounds of muscle and teeth clamping onto his gun arm with surgical precision. The man screamed and went down, his pistol flying into the darkness. Before he could recover, Caleb was on him, driving a knee into his solar plexus and following with an elbow to the temple. 2 down. Contact! Someone shouted from inside the cave. We've got contact! The element of surprise was gone. Caleb grabbed Phantom's collar and pulled him back as gunfire erupted from the cave entrance. Wild shots, panicked, punching into the trees above their heads. He rolled behind a boulder, Phantom pressed against his side. Caleb took 3 deep breaths. 3 armed men, confined space, 1 hostage, 1 dog. He'd faced worse. He just couldn't remember when. Inside the cave, chaos reigned. The scarred man, Vance had called him Dex, was shouting orders while the remaining thugs scattered for cover. The nervous kid had dropped his torch, and it lay on the ground near the woodpile, flames licking dangerously close to the accelerant-soaked timber. Lauren watched it all with wide eyes, her prayers forgotten. Something was happening. Something she hadn't dared hope for. "Who is it?" one of the thugs was yelling. "Who's out there?" "I don't know." Dex's composure was cracking. "Just keep shooting." More gunfire, more screaming, and then silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums like a hand. Lauren held her breath. A voice echoed from the darkness outside the cave. Calm, controlled, absolutely certain of itself. "This is your one warning." The voice was male, authoritative, carrying the weight of someone who had given orders that couldn't be questioned. "Throw out your weapons and release the hostages. Do it now and you walk out of here breathing. Make me come in after you, and I can't make that promise." Dex laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone you should have watched for." Caleb pressed his back against the boulder, running calculations in his head. 3 men left inside. At least one was rattled enough to miss from 15 feet. The leader was keeping his head, but barely. The third was an unknown. The torch was the problem. It was too close to that woodpile. If it caught, Lauren and her dog would have seconds. "Phantom," Caleb looked down at his partner. "I need you to draw their fire. Short burst, then retreat. Can you do that?" Phantom's tail gave one sweep. "Ready." "On 3. Caleb positioned himself at the edge of the boulder. 1, 2, 3. Phantom exploded from cover, streaking across the mouth of the cave in a tan and black blur. Gunfire erupted immediately, just as Caleb had expected. The shooters tracked the dog, their aim following his movement, which meant they weren't watching the entrance. Caleb moved. He came through the cave mouth low and fast, decades of training compressing into muscle memory. The first thug was still tracking Phantom when Caleb hit him from the side, driving him into the rock wall with a shoulder check that sent his weapon flying. A quick strike to the back of the neck, and he was down. 3. The nervous kid spun toward him, reaching for something at his belt, a knife maybe, or a backup weapon. Caleb closed the distance before he could draw, grabbed his wrist, twisted, and felt something pop. The kid screamed and dropped to his knees. 4. Dex, the scarred man, had retreated to the back of the cave near the woodpile, near Lauren. He had his pistol pressed against her temple, and his eyes were wild with something that might have been fear, or might have been rage. "Stop right there." Dex's voice cracked on the last word. "I'll kill her. I swear to God I'll kill her." Caleb stopped. Phantom emerged from the darkness and took position at his side, teeth bared, a low growl vibrating through the cave. But he didn't advance. He was waiting, watching. "You don't want to do that." Caleb's voice was steady, almost gentle. "Think about it. You pull that trigger, you've got nothing left to bargain with. And my dog, he's faster than you. The second you fire, he'll be on you, and I won't call him off." Dex's hand was shaking. The gun trembled against Lauren's head. "Who are you?" he demanded. "FBI? DEA?" "Neither." "Then what?" Caleb took one step forward, just one. "I'm nobody. Just a guy walking his dog." He let the words hang. "You want to know the funny thing? If you hadn't taken her, hadn't dragged her out here, hadn't decided to make this ugly, I never would have found you. You did this to yourself." Dex's eyes darted to the cave entrance, calculated. Caleb could see the thoughts racing behind them. Odds, angles, escape routes. "There's nowhere to go," Caleb said softly. "It's over." Lauren watched the stranger with something between disbelief and awe. He stood in the center of the cave like he owned it. Not tall exactly, but solid. Built like someone who understood that bodies were tools and had spent years sharpening his into something dangerous. His hair was dark brown, cropped short, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were the grey of storm clouds, calm and relentless. He was wearing a military uniform. Navy, she thought, though she couldn't place the specific designation. The digital camouflage pattern blended with the shadows until he seemed to be made of darkness itself. And his dog, the German shepherd that had materialized from nowhere, teeth flashing, pulling gunfire like a lightning rod. The dog stood beside him now, watching Dex with the patient intensity of a predator who had already decided on his prey. "Who are you?" she wanted to ask. "Where did you come from?" But the gun against her temple kept her silent. Dex was thinking. Caleb could see it in his eyes, the desperate calculation of a man who had run out of good options and was trying to find a bad one that might work. "Here's what's going to happen," Dex said, straightening slightly. "I'm going to walk out of here. She's coming with me. Once I'm clear, once I'm safe, I'll let her go. You have my word." Caleb almost laughed. "Your word? The word of a man who was about to burn a cop alive? That word? It's all I've got." "No," Caleb shook his head slowly. "It's not." He whistled. Phantom moved, not toward Dex, but toward the torch. The dog grabbed it in his jaws and pulled it away from the woodpile, dragging it toward the center of the cave where the stone floor was bare. Then he dropped it and returned to Caleb's side, tongue lolling, eyes never leaving the scarred man. Dex stared. "What the—" "Your leverage is gone," Caleb said. "No fire, no quick escape, just you, me, and choices." He took another step forward. "Let her go. Take your chances in court. Live to see another sunrise." "You don't understand." Dex's voice dropped to something almost like a plea. "The people I work for, they'll kill me. Prison won't protect me. Nothing will." "Maybe. But right now, in this cave, the only person who can decide if you live or die is you." Caleb's grey eyes bore into him. "Choose." The gun trembled. Lauren held her breath. Phantom growled. And Dex made his choice. The pistol dropped. It clattered against the stone floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud. In the sudden silence, Dex's hands went up, empty, and his shoulders slumped like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "On your knees," Caleb ordered. "Hands behind your head." Dex obeyed. The fight had gone out of him all at once, leaving behind nothing but a tired, scared man who had finally run out of road. Caleb moved quickly, securing him with zip ties he'd taken from Vance's belt. Always useful, always worth checking for. Then he turned to Lauren. She was shaking. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed earlier were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dirt and blood. Her canine partner was straining against his bonds, whimpering through his muzzled jaw. "You're okay," Caleb said softly, kneeling beside her. "You're okay now." He cut her ropes with a knife from his boot, then moved to the Malinois. The dog's eyes followed his every move, wary, protective. "Easy, boy," Caleb murmured. "I'm a friend." Phantom approached slowly, head low, tail giving one tentative wag. The Malinois studied him for a long moment, two working dogs assessing each other, communicating in a language older than words. Then the tension broke. The Malinois' tail moved, just a little, just enough. Caleb unwrapped the wire from his muzzle, careful not to cut the sensitive skin beneath. The dog immediately pushed past him to reach Lauren, pressing his body against hers with a desperation that needed no translation. "Titan," she whispered, burying her face in his fur. "Oh God, Titan." Caleb gave her a moment. She needed it, and frankly so did he. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind that familiar emptiness. The hollow feeling that came after violence, when your body realized it was still alive, and didn't quite know what to do with that information. He looked around the cave. 5 men down, no casualties, at least none that wouldn't recover. A hostage freed, a dog saved. Not bad for a guy who was supposed to be on leave. His phone had no signal this deep in the ravine, but Lauren's radio was still clipped to her vest. He reached for it. "Blackwater Dispatch, this is—" He paused. What was he? Nobody. "This is an off-duty military asset. Officer down at the old Harrow mine. Situation is contained. Multiple suspects in custody. Requesting immediate backup and medical. Static." Then a voice, crackling but clear. "Copy that. Units en route. Can I get your name?" Caleb looked at Lauren, who was watching him with eyes that held too many questions. "Just someone who was watching," he said. They waited. Caleb sat near the cave entrance. Phantom pressed against his side, watching the tree line for threats that probably weren't coming, but couldn't be ignored. Old habits, survival instincts, the things that had kept him alive for 15 years in the world's worst places. Lauren sat a few feet away, Titan's head in her lap, her hand moving mechanically through his fur. She hadn't said much since the ropes came off. Processing, probably. Trauma had its own timeline, and you couldn't rush it. But eventually she spoke. Why? Caleb didn't pretend to misunderstand. Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. You're not from here. You had no reason to get involved. He was quiet for a long moment. Phantom's ears twitched, and somewhere in the distance, a siren began to wail. I knew someone once, Caleb finally said. Good man. Better soldier. We were in a bad spot overseas, pinned down, no backup coming. I wanted to wait, play it safe. He said no. He said if we didn't move, people would die. Caleb's jaw tightened. He moved. He saved 11 lives that day. And then he died in my arms 3 days later because the shrapnel the doctors missed decided it wasn't done. Lauren didn't say anything. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response. I spent 4 months telling myself I was done, Caleb continued. Done being the guy who runs toward trouble. Done trying to save people who might not make it anyway. Done carrying the weight of every choice I couldn't take back. He looked at her then, and his grey eyes were softer than they'd been in the cave. Tired. Human. But I heard you praying, and I thought about Martinez, about what he would have done, and I knew if I walked away, I'd never be able to live with who I'd become. The sirens were louder now, red and blue lights beginning to flicker through the trees. Lauren reached out and touched his arm, just for a second, just enough. Thank you, she said, for not walking away. Caleb nodded once. Thank your dog. Phantom heard you first. The cavalry arrived in a chaos of lights and voices and questions Caleb didn't want to answer. Sheriff's deputies secured the scene while paramedics checked Lauren's injuries. Minor, thankfully, nothing that wouldn't heal. The 5 thugs were loaded into transport vehicles, Dex among them, his face blank and empty. A detective tried to pull Caleb aside for a statement. He gave the minimum required, heard screaming, investigated, intervened. No, he didn't know the suspects. No, he didn't know the victim. No, he wouldn't be pressing charges. And your name? The detective asked, pen hovering over his notepad. Harlan, Caleb said. Caleb Harlan, military, Navy, on leave. The detective's eyebrows rose. SEAL. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't have to. Lauren found him as the scene was winding down, leaning against a tree at the edge of the chaos with Phantom at his feet. Titan walked beside her, moving stiffly but steadily. They want me to go to the hospital, she said. Observation overnight. Standard procedure. After almost being burned alive seemed unnecessary to say out loud. You should go, Caleb said. I will. She hesitated. The detective said you refused to give a statement beyond the basics, that you're not interested in recognition or commendation. I'm not. Why? Caleb looked at Phantom, who had lifted his head at Lauren's approach and was watching Titan with calm, assessing eyes. Because I didn't do it for recognition, he said. I did it because it was right, and because once, a long time ago, someone taught me that's supposed to be enough. Lauren nodded slowly. She seemed to understand, or at least to accept. Where will you go? She asked. Caleb shrugged. I've got a cabin about 3 miles from here. Rented it for 6 weeks. I've got 4 left, and then I figure out what comes next. Lauren reached into her pocket and pulled out a card, her business card, creased and dirty, but still legible. When you figure it out, she said, pressing it into his hand, call me. I might know some people who could use someone like you. Caleb looked at the card. Officer Lauren Voss, Blackwater County Sheriff's Department, K9 unit. I'll think about it, he said. Lauren smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. That's all I ask. She turned and walked toward the waiting ambulance, Titan at her side. At the door, she paused and looked back. Hey, Harlan. Yeah? Your friend Martinez. He'd be proud of you tonight. She climbed into the ambulance before Caleb could respond. The doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, lights flashing, carrying her towards safety and healing and the long work of rebuilding. Caleb watched it go. Phantom pressed his nose against Caleb's palm, and Caleb scratched behind his ears without thinking. "What do you think, boy?" he murmured. "Think Martinez would be proud?" Phantom's tail swept once across the frozen ground. Caleb supposed that was answer enough. He walked back to his cabin as dawn began to break over the mountains, a slow grey light that turned the snow to silver and made the world look clean. He didn't feel clean. He felt tired and hollow and scraped raw in places he'd thought had scarred over long ago. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the ache in his muscles and the throb in his bruised knuckles, there was something else, something that felt almost like purpose. Phantom walked beside him, steady and patient, limping slightly on his bad leg, but refusing to slow down. They were partners. They'd always be partners. And whatever came next, whatever choices waited around the next corner, they'd face it together. The cabin emerged from the trees, small and unremarkable, smoke still curling from the chimney, where the fire he'd left had burned down to embers. Caleb climbed the porch steps and paused at the door. 4 more weeks, he thought. 4 more weeks to figure out what kind of man I want to be. He opened the door and stepped inside, Phantom at his heel. Behind them, the sun continued to rise, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere a bird began to sing, tentative at first, then stronger, as if reminding the world that darkness never got the final word. Caleb didn't hear it, but Phantom's ears twitched, and his tail gave one final sweep. Morning had come, and they were both still standing. 3 days passed before Caleb heard the knock. He had spent those days doing what he always did when his mind wouldn't quiet, chopping wood until his shoulders burned, running the trails until his lungs screamed, sitting on the porch with Phantom and watching the tree line like it might reveal some answer he hadn't thought to ask for. The work helped. The running helped more. But nothing could shake the image of Lauren Voss kneeling in that cave, praying to a god who had apparently decided to send a broken Navy SEAL instead of an angel. Phantom heard the vehicle before Caleb did. The dog's head lifted from his paws, ears rotating toward the access road, and a low rumble built in his chest. "Easy," Caleb said, though he was already reaching for the hunting knife he kept beside the door. Old habits. Probably just lost hikers. But the knock, when it came, wasn't the hesitant tap of someone looking for directions. It was 3 sharp raps, confident, deliberate, the knock of someone who expected the door to open. Caleb opened it anyway. Lauren Voss stood on his porch, Titan at her side. She looked better than the last time he'd seen her. The blood cleaned from her face, the bruises fading to yellow, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days, someone running on coffee and adrenaline and something that looked a lot like fear. "Officer Voss," Caleb said, "shouldn't you be in a hospital bed?" "Discharged yesterday." She didn't smile. "We need to talk." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Phantom had come to stand beside him, and the 2 dogs were doing that silent assessment thing again. Titan's tail giving a cautious wag, Phantom's posture relaxing by degrees. "Come in," Caleb finally said, stepping aside. "Coffee?" "God, yes." She followed him into the cabin, Titan pressing close to her leg. Caleb noticed the way her hand kept drifting to the dog's head, fingers tangling in his fur, like she needed the contact to remind herself they both survived. He understood that. Phantom was the same for him. He poured 2 cups of coffee, black, strong, the way he'd learned to drink it during endless night watches in places that didn't have names on any official map. Lauren took hers with both hands and breathed in the steam like it was oxygen. "So," Caleb said, settling into the chair across from her. "What couldn't wait?" Lauren set down her cup. Her hands were steady, but something in her jaw was tight. "Vance Crowe," she said. "The man with the scar, he's dead." Caleb's coffee stopped halfway to his lips. "Dead? How?" "Suicide, supposedly." The word came out bitter, twisted. "Hung himself in his cell 2 nights ago. No witnesses, no footage. The cameras in that wing were conveniently malfunctioning." "You don't believe it?" Caleb set down his cup. I saw his face when he surrendered. That wasn't a man planning to die. That was a man planning to deal. Exactly. Lauren leaned forward. Vance was going to talk. He'd already requested a meeting with the FBI. Said he had information about a network that went way beyond weapons smuggling. Names, dates, money trails. Then 12 hours before that meeting, he's found dead in his cell. Phantom shifted, pressing his nose against Caleb's knee. The dog could feel the tension building in the room, the way the air was getting heavier. Why are you telling me this? Lauren's eyes met his. Because I'm next. The words hung in the air like smoke. 2 days ago, she continued, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, nothing was damaged, but they left something on my pillow. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. Caleb picked it up. It was a picture of Lauren, taken from a distance. Grainy, but unmistakably her. She was standing outside the hospital, Titan beside her, looking at her phone. The timestamp in the corner was from the day she was discharged. They're watching me, Lauren said. They want me to know they're watching. Have you told anyone? Your captain? The FBI? I told my captain. He said he'd look into it. Her laugh was hollow. That was 48 hours ago. Haven't heard a word since. Caleb turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written 3 words in neat, precise handwriting. Stay quiet. Live. They're not just watching, Caleb said slowly. They're sending a message. And I'm not the only one. Lauren pulled out her phone and scrolled to a text message. This came in last night, unknown number, blocked when I tried to trace it. She handed him the phone. Caleb read the message. The seal has a dog. Dogs can be hurt. Think about that. Something cold moved through Caleb's chest. He looked at Phantom, who had sensed the shift in his mood and was watching him with those steady, intelligent eyes. They know about me, Caleb said. They know about both of us. Lauren took back her phone. Whatever Vance was going to tell the FBI, it scared someone powerful enough to reach inside a county jail and make a man disappear. Someone powerful enough to track a cop who should have been protected. Someone powerful enough to threaten a Navy SEAL on his own turf. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind pushed through the pines, and somewhere a branch cracked under the weight of snow. What do you want from me? Lauren's jaw tightened. I want to finish what I started. Vance mentioned a name before you showed up. Someone he called the broker. Whoever that is, they're the one pulling the strings. They're the one who ordered my death. They're the one who killed Vance. Her eyes blazed. And I'm going to find them. That sounds like a good way to end up dead. Maybe, she didn't flinch, but I'd rather die hunting than die hiding. Caleb studied her. This woman who had faced a burning stake 3 days ago and was now sitting in his cabin planning to take on a shadow network that had already proven it could reach anywhere. She was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He had known a lot of people like that. Most of them were dead, but some of them had changed the world. Vance mentioned the broker, Caleb said slowly. What else do you know? Lauren's eyes lit up, not with hope exactly, but with a recognition that she wasn't alone anymore. Not much, but I know someone who might know more. She hesitated. One of the men you took down in the cave, the nervous kid with the torch. His name is Jordan Hale, 22 years old, no prior record, hired muscle for what he thought was a simple intimidation job. He's in county lockup right now, scared out of his mind, and I think he's ready to talk. The FBI hasn't gotten to him yet. The FBI is moving slow. Jurisdictional issues, paperwork, bureaucracy. Lauren's voice hardened. By the time they cut through the red tape, Jordan Hale might end up like Vance Crowe, unless someone gets to him first. Caleb understood what she was asking. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of involvement he'd sworn to avoid. He looked at Phantom. The dog looked back, and something passed between them. A silent conversation built on years of partnership, trust, and shared survival. I'm going to regret this, Caleb said. Lauren's smile was thin but genuine. Probably, but at least you won't regret it alone. They left within the hour. Lauren drove, a battered pickup truck that had seen better decades. Caleb sat in the passenger seat with Phantom in the back. watching the forest give way to farmland and farmland give way to the outskirts of town. Rex rode beside Phantom. The two dogs had apparently decided to tolerate each other's presence. "Tell me about the smuggling ring," Caleb said. "How did you find them?" Lauren's hands tightened on the wheel. "Accident, mostly. I was running a training exercise with Rex, routine stuff, working on scent detection. We were in the old mining district and Rex hit on something. I thought it was a false positive at first, but he was insistent. So I dug and found a cache hidden in one of the collapsed tunnels. 3 crates of modified AR-15S, serial numbers filed off. Street value maybe 50,000. She shook her head. "I should have called it in immediately. Protocol says you secure the scene and wait for backup. But something felt wrong. The cache was too clean, too organized, like someone knew exactly where to put it and exactly when to move it." "You suspected inside involvement." "I suspected something, so I took photos, documented everything, and filed my report directly with the state police instead of going through local channels." Her jaw clenched. 2 days later, I got a call from my captain. He wanted to know why I'd gone over his head. He was angry. Angrier than the situation warranted. That's when I knew. "Your captain is involved." "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he's just protecting someone who is." Lauren's voice dropped. "This town, Blackwater Ridge, it looks quiet, peaceful. But there's rot underneath. People who've been here for generations. Families with money and influence. Connections that go back decades. If the smuggling ring has been operating in those mines for as long as I think it has, then someone with real power has been protecting them." Caleb absorbed this. A small town with deep roots and deeper secrets. A network that could reach into jails and make witnesses disappear. A broker who operated in shadows. This was bigger than a few crates of guns. "Much bigger," Lauren agreed. The county jail appeared around the next bend, a squat concrete building that looked more like a warehouse than a place where men waited to learn their fates. Lauren pulled into the visitor lot and killed the engine. "Ground rules," she said. "I do the talking. You're my consultant, private security if anyone asks. Don't volunteer information, don't make threats, and don't touch anyone unless absolutely necessary." "I know how interrogations work." "This isn't an interrogation, it's a conversation." She opened her door. "Jordan Hale is terrified. If we push too hard, he'll shut down. If we push just right, he might give us the thread we need to unravel this whole thing." They left the dogs in the truck, with the windows cracked. Phantom watched Caleb go with those steady, patient eyes. The eyes of a partner who understood that some missions required human hands. Inside, the jail smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. A board deputy processed their credentials, Megan's badge, Caleb's military ID, and led them to a visitation room where Jordan Hale sat waiting. The kid looked worse than Caleb remembered. His face was pale, eyes ringed with dark circles, and his hands trembled slightly where they rested on the metal table. The nervous energy that had made him hesitate with the torch in the cave had curdled into something closer to raw fear. "Officer Voss," Jordan's voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd come." Lauren sat down across from him. Caleb stayed standing, back against the wall, arms crossed. "Jordan," Lauren said gently, "how are you holding up? How do you think?" The kid's laugh was brittle. "I'm in jail. My lawyer says I'm looking at 15 to 20. My mum won't return my calls. And everyone keeps telling me that if I talk, I'll end up like..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Like Vance," Lauren finished. Jordan flinched like she'd struck him. "I heard what happened to him," Lauren continued. "And I'm not going to lie to you, Jordan. The people he was going to name, they're powerful, dangerous, but they're not invincible. You don't know that. I know that 3 days ago I was tied to a stake waiting to burn, and I'm still here." Lauren leaned forward. "You made a mistake, Jordan, a bad one, but you're not a killer. I saw your face in that cave. You didn't want to light that fire. You hesitated." Jordan's eyes glistened. "I just needed the money. They said it was easy work, said nobody would get hurt. I didn't know. I didn't know it would be like that." "I believe you." Lauren's voice was soft. and I want to help you. But I need something in return." "I can't." Jordan shook his head, panic rising. "If I talk, they'll find me. They'll kill me. If you don't talk, you'll spend the next 2 decades in a cell, wondering every day if this is the day they decide you know too much." Lauren reached across the table and touched his hand. "There's no safe choice here, Jordan. There's only the choice that lets you live with yourself." Jordan stared at her hand on his. His breathing was ragged, his whole body trembling. "The broker," he whispered finally. "That's what they called him. I never met him, never saw his face. But Vance reported to him. Everyone reported to him." "How did they communicate?" "Dead drops, burner phones, sometimes coded messages through a website. I don't know which one." Jordan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But there was something else. Something Vance said the night before we took you." Lauren waited. He said the broker had a meeting scheduled, something big, a deal that was going to change everything. He said after this deal went through, they wouldn't need the mines anymore. They'd have something better. "Did he say what?" Jordan shook his head. "Just that it was happening soon, within the week, and that once it was done, there'd be no going back." Caleb spoke for the first time. "Where?" Jordan looked up at him, startled by the cold authority in his voice. "Where is this meeting happening?" Caleb repeated. I don't know for sure." Jordan's words came faster now, tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back. "But Vance mentioned a name, Caldwell. He said Caldwell was going to be there." Lauren went still. "Senator Harlan Whitaker? I don't know. Maybe. Vance just said Caldwell was the key, that without Caldwell, the whole thing falls apart." Caleb and Lauren exchanged a look. State Senator Harlan Whitaker was a pillar of Montana politics, wealthy, connected, rumored to have presidential ambitions. If he was involved in this, they weren't dealing with a local smuggling ring anymore. They were dealing with something that could reach the highest levels of power. "Is there anything else?" Lauren pressed. "Anything at all?" Jordan hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, clearly contraband, smuggled past the guards. "Vance gave this to me before the job. Said if anything went wrong, I should use it to buy my way out." He slid it across the table. "I don't even know what it means." Lauren unfolded the paper. It was a series of numbers, coordinates maybe, or some kind of code. "Thank you, Jordan." She stood and tucked the paper into her jacket. "I'm going to do everything I can to help you, but you need to stay quiet. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Not your lawyer, not your cellmate, no one. Do you understand?" Jordan nodded, his face pale, but somehow lighter, like confession had lifted a weight he couldn't carry alone. They left the jail in silence. Lauren didn't speak until they were back in the truck. Doors closed. Dogs alert in the back seat. "Senator Harlan Whitaker," she said, staring at the paper in her hands. "If Jordan's right, if a sitting state senator is the broker, or connected to him, this goes beyond anything I can handle alone." "It goes beyond anything we can handle alone," Caleb corrected. "The FBI state police. If Whitaker has people inside those agencies, we can't trust any of them." "Then what do we do?" Caleb took the paper from her and studied the numbers. They weren't coordinates. The format was wrong. Not a phone number either. But something about them was familiar, tugging at a memory he couldn't quite place. "We find out what this means," he said, "and we do it without anyone knowing we're looking." His phone buzzed. Caleb pulled it out and found a text from an unknown number, the same format Lauren had shown him earlier. "You should have stayed in your cabin, Seal. Now it's too late." Below the text was a photo, Caleb's cabin taken from the tree line. A red X drawn over the door. Phantom growled low in the back seat, as if he could sense the threat through the phone's screen. "They know," Lauren breathed. Caleb deleted the message, but his jaw was set like stone. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them come." Lauren stared at him. "Are you insane?" "Probably." Caleb pocketed his phone and looked out the window, his reflection a stranger's face. "But I spent 4 months hiding from myself. I'm done hiding from anyone else." He turned to her, and something in his grey eyes had changed, hardened, focused, like a weapon coming off safety. They want a war. They'll get one. But this time, I choose the battlefield. Lauren was quiet for a long moment. Then she started the truck, and Titan and Phantom settled into the back seat. Two warriors who understood without words that the mission had changed. "Where to?" she asked. Caleb looked at the paper again. The numbers swam before his eyes, and suddenly the memory clicked. "I know what these are," he said slowly. "They're Swiss bank routing codes. I've seen this format before. Black Ops funding, untraceable accounts." He pointed to a specific sequence. This prefix indicates the account holder has diplomatic protection, which means whoever controls this account is untouchable through normal channels. Lauren's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "So we're not just dealing with a state senator. We're dealing with someone who can afford to own a state senator." Caleb folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. "And if we're going to take them down, we need proof that even diplomatic immunity can't make disappear." "How do we get that kind of proof?" Caleb thought about the mines, about the tunnels where the weapons had been hidden, about the darkness that had swallowed Lauren's screams before he'd found her. "We go back to where it started," he said. "We go back to the caves." Lauren pulled onto the main road, the engine rumbling beneath them like a heartbeat. Behind them, the jail grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead of them, the mountains waited, holding secrets that someone had killed to protect. And somewhere in the shadows, the broker was watching. The mines had not changed in 3 days, but Caleb had. He moved through the entrance with Phantom at his heel, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge, every shadow a potential threat. Lauren followed close behind, Rex pressed against her leg, her hand resting on the service weapon she'd retrieved from her apartment before they'd come here. "You sure about this?" Lauren whispered. "No," Caleb admitted, "but Vance was willing to die to protect whatever's down here. That means it's worth finding." The tunnel stretched ahead of them, darkness swallowing their flashlight beams like hungry mouths. Caleb had brought better equipment this time, tactical lights, rope, a handheld GPS unit that probably wouldn't work underground, but made him feel better anyway. What he hadn't brought was backup, because backup meant trust, and trust was a currency they couldn't afford to spend. Phantom's nose worked the air constantly, cataloguing scents Caleb couldn't detect. The dog's body language was tense but controlled, alert, not alarmed. Whatever waited ahead, they hadn't found it yet. "The cache I discovered was about half a mile in," Lauren said quietly. "Secondary tunnel branches off to the left, but I only explored maybe a quarter of the system before I called it in. So there could be more." "There's definitely more. These mines run for miles. If the smugglers have been using them for years, they could have dozens of storage sites." Caleb processed this. Dozens of sites meant organization, infrastructure, regular access. It meant this wasn't a casual operation. It was a business. And businesses kept records. "We're looking for paperwork," Caleb said. "Ledgers, manifests. Anything that proves money changed hands. The guns are evidence, but money is what brings people down." They moved deeper, the temperature dropping with every step. Caleb counted side tunnels as they passed. 3 on the right, 2 on the left. Each one a black void that could hide anything. Phantom paused at the 4th intersection, his head swinging toward a passage Caleb hadn't noticed, partially concealed by a collapse of timber and stone. "What is it, boy?" Phantom didn't bark. He simply stood, locked on the hidden tunnel, his body vibrating with that particular tension that meant something is there. Caleb and Lauren exchanged a look. Then they squeezed through the gap, pushing past rotted wood and loose rock, emerging into a space that made Caleb's breath catch. It wasn't a storage site. It was an office. Someone had carved out a chamber in the stone and turned it into a functional workspace. A desk sat against one wall, covered in papers. Filing cabinets lined another. A generator hummed in the corner, powering a laptop that glowed with standby light. "My God," Lauren breathed. "This is Command Central." Caleb moved to the desk, his hands already reaching for the papers. Financial statements, shipping manifests, names, dates, dollar amounts that made his eyes widen. "This isn't just guns," he said, scanning a document. "They're moving people too. human trafficking. And these numbers, he looked up at Lauren. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Lauren had moved to the filing cabinets, pulling drawers open with hands that trembled slightly. Caleb, you need to see this. He crossed to her and looked at what she'd found. Photographs, dozens of them. Men in suits shaking hands, exchanging briefcases, signing documents. Politicians, businessmen. Faces Caleb recognized from news coverage and campaign ads. And in nearly every photo, standing just off to the side with a politician's smile and a predator's eyes, was Senator Harlan Whitaker. He's not just connected to the broker, Lauren said, her voice hollow. He is the broker. He's been running this entire operation. Caleb stared at Whitaker's face, the silver hair, the expensive suit, the expression of a man who believed he was untouchable. We need to take all of this, Caleb said. Everything we can carry. And then we need to get out of here before… Phantom's head snapped toward the tunnel entrance. The dog's growl was low and urgent, building in his chest like thunder before a storm. Rex joined him, both animals positioning themselves between their handlers and the darkness beyond. Someone's coming, Lauren whispered. Caleb killed his flashlight. Lauren did the same. In the sudden darkness, the generator's hum seemed impossibly loud. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the tunnel system. 2 men, maybe 3. Their words indistinct, but their tone unmistakable. They were searching. Is there another way out? Caleb breathed. I don't know. I never mapped this section. Footsteps grew louder. A flashlight beam swept across the tunnel intersection, maybe 50 yards away. Check the North Passage, someone called. The senator wants this place cleaned out by midnight. Caleb's mind raced. They were trapped in a dead end, with armed men closing in, and evidence that could bring down a United States senator. If they were caught, they wouldn't make it out of these tunnels alive. He looked at the laptop, grabbed it, stuffed as many papers as he could into his jacket. Lauren was doing the same, shoving photographs into her pockets with desperate efficiency. We fight or we hide, she whispered. We hide first. Fight if we have to. Caleb pointed to the far corner of the chamber, where the shadows were deepest. There. They pressed themselves into the darkness, dogs flanking them, barely breathing. The footsteps grew closer. A flashlight beam cut through the tunnel entrance, sweeping across the chamber. Clear, someone announced. Nothing here. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. Beside him, he felt Lauren trembling. Not from fear, he realized, but from the effort of staying still when every instinct screamed to run. The beam swept again, slower this time. It passed over the desk, the filing cabinets, the empty space where papers and photographs had been. Wait! The voice changed, sharpening. Someone's been here. The files are missing. Another voice, harder. Fan out. They can't have gotten far. The chamber erupted with light as multiple flashlights converged on the entrance. Caleb counted 3 men, no, 4, all armed, all moving with the coordinated precision of professionals. There was no more hiding. Caleb's hand found Phantom's collar. On my mark, he breathed, full engagement. Phantom's muscles coiled. Now, the dog exploded from the shadows like a guided missile, 70 pounds of fury targeting the nearest gunman's weapon arm. The man screamed and went down, his rifle clattering against stone. Rex was a half-second behind, driving into the second man's legs with enough force to send him sprawling. Caleb moved before conscious thought could slow him down. The third man was bringing his weapon up, finger finding the trigger, when Caleb's fist connected with his throat. The man choked, stumbled, and Caleb followed with an elbow to the temple that dropped him like a puppet with cut strings. The fourth man fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash, a blinding strobe. Caleb felt the bullet pass inches from his ear, hot air, displacement, the breath of death whispering past. Lauren's shot answered before the echo faded. The fourth man staggered, clutching his shoulder, his weapon falling. He wasn't dead. Lauren had aimed to wound, not kill. But he was out of the fight. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Caleb stood in the center of the chaos, breathing hard. Phantom pressing against his leg. 4 men down, no casualties on their side. The laptop and documents still secure. We need to move, Lauren said. her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That shot will bring anyone else in these tunnels running. Can you walk? Can you? Caleb almost smiled. Almost. They ran. The tunnels blurred past them, a maze of darkness and stone, and the ever-present fear of more enemies around every corner. Phantom and Rex led the way, their senses cutting through the blackness, finding paths their human partners couldn't see. Behind them, shouting echoed through the mine. More men coming, more guns, more death waiting to catch up. There! Lauren pointed to a shaft of light ahead, natural light, grey and dim, but unmistakably the outside world. They burst from the mine into the fading afternoon, lungs burning, hearts racing. The cold mountain air hit Caleb's face like a benediction, and for one perfect moment he allowed himself to feel relief. Then he saw the vehicles. 3 black SUVs were parked at the base of the access road, blocking their exit. Men in tactical gear were already deploying, weapons raised, forming a perimeter. And standing in front of the lead vehicle, silver hair gleaming in the winter light, was Senator Harlan Whitaker. "Lieutenant Commander Harlan," Whitaker called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "I was hoping we could avoid this. I really was." Caleb positioned himself in front of Lauren, Phantom at his side. He could feel the laptop pressing against his ribs, the documents crackling in his jacket. Evidence. Proof. Everything they needed to bring this man down, if they lived long enough to use it. "Senator," Caleb said flatly, "didn't expect to see you getting your hands dirty. Sometimes one must ensure things are done correctly." Whitaker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Commander." The incident in the cave was supposed to eliminate a problem. Instead, it created several new ones. "Sorry to disappoint." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Whitaker took a step forward, hands spread in a gesture that might have been conciliatory if not for the dozen armed men at his back. "You have something that belongs to me. Return it. Walk away, and we'll pretend this never happened. You can go back to your cabin, finish your leave, return to your unit. Officer Voss can resume her career, perhaps in a different jurisdiction. Everyone wins." "Except the people you've trafficked," Caleb said. "The ones who ended up in shipping containers instead of their homes." Whitaker's expression flickered. Annoyance, perhaps, or the faint surprise of a man who wasn't used to being challenged. "Unfortunate necessities, the cost of building something larger." He spread his hands. "You're a soldier, Commander. You understand collateral damage." "I understand murder." "Then you understand that I can't let you leave here with that laptop." Whitaker's voice hardened. "I'm offering you a choice. Take it, or my men will take it from your corpse." Caleb felt Lauren step up beside him. Her weapon was holstered, but her hand rested on it, ready. "There's another choice," she said quietly. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Officer Voss, I'm told you pray. Perhaps you should start." "I did pray." Lauren's voice was steady, dangerous. "I prayed for someone to find us in that cave. Someone did." She took another step forward. "Now I'm praying that you make the mistake of thinking you can threaten us and walk away." Something shifted in Whitaker's eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the first flicker of uncertainty. He was used to controlling every variable, predicting every outcome. He hadn't predicted this. "You're outnumbered," Whitaker pointed out. "Outgunned. You have no backup, no extraction plan, and no way to—" Phantom barked once, sharp, commanding. At the same moment, the sound of rotors filled the air. Caleb looked up and felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been coiled tight since the moment he'd first heard Lauren's screams in the forest. A helicopter was descending toward the clearing. Not a news chopper or a medical bird. A UH-60 Blackhawk, bristling with military hardware, and bearing markings Caleb knew well. Naval Special Warfare. His brothers were coming. Whitaker's face went pale. "That's impossible. How did they—" "Before we left my cabin," Caleb said quietly, "I made a call, an old friend, someone who owed me a favor." He met Whitaker's eyes and smiled, a cold, hard smile that held no warmth at all. "You're right, Senator. I understand collateral damage. I also understand backup. The Black Hawk touched down in a hurricane of rotor wash, and doors slid open to reveal a half-dozen men in tactical gear, weapons trained on Whitaker's security detail. At their head was a face Caleb hadn't seen in 2 years, Commander Riley Vargas, his former operations officer, 5'4" of controlled fury with a service record that would make most men weep. "Harlan," Vargas's voice cut through the noise. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too. You got my message?" "Got your message, tracked your GPS and called in some favors." Vargas's eyes swept the scene, the armed men, the senator, the 2 dogs standing guard over their handlers. "Looks like you've been busy." "You have no authority here," Whitaker shouted, his composure finally cracking. "This is domestic soil. You can't—" "Can't what?" Vargas stepped forward, and her team moved with her, a wall of lethal capability. "Can't respond to a distress call from a fellow operator. Can't assist a federal investigation." She pulled out her phone and held it up. "I've got the Attorney General on speed dial. Senator, want to tell him how you tried to burn a police officer alive to cover up your trafficking operation." Whitaker's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. His security detail was lowering their weapons, one by one, the reality of their situation finally penetrating. They were professionals, mercenaries probably, or former military gone private. Professionals knew when a fight was unwinnable. "On your knees," Vargas ordered. "All of you, hands behind your heads." They obeyed. Even Whitaker, his face a mask of barely controlled rage, sank to the frozen ground. Caleb walked toward him, Phantom padding at his side. He stopped a foot away and looked down at the man who had ordered Lauren's death, who had built an empire on human misery, who had believed himself untouchable. "You asked me who I was," Caleb said quietly. "The night in the cave, your man Vance asked me who I was." Whitaker said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight Caleb could see the muscles jumping. "I told him I was nobody, just a guy walking his dog." Caleb crouched, bringing himself eye level with the senator. "But here's the thing about nobodies. We don't have careers to protect. We don't have ambitions to pursue. We don't have anything to lose." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the laptop, held it up so Whitaker could see it clearly. "Which makes us very, very dangerous." Whitaker's eyes fixed on the laptop, and Caleb saw the exact moment hope died in them. All the money, all the power, all the connections, none of it mattered now. The evidence would speak, and when it did, no amount of influence could silence it. "This isn't over," Whitaker whispered. "No," Caleb agreed. "It's just beginning." He stood, tucked the laptop back into his jacket, and walked away. Lauren was waiting by the Black Hawk. Rex pressed against her leg, her face drawn, but somehow lighter than he'd seen it since the cave. "Is it really done?" she asked. "The arrests are done. The trials will take years, but yes, the hard part is over." Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and touched his arm, a brief contact, warm despite the cold. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." Caleb looked at Phantom, who had settled at his feet with a long, satisfied exhale. The dog's eyes were calm now, the tension of combat slowly bleeding away. "Thank him," Caleb said. "He's the one who heard you first." Lauren smiled, a real smile, tired but genuine. "Then thank you both." Vargas approached, her face all business. "Harlan, we need to debrief. The AG's office is sending people. FBI is mobilizing. And there's going to be a lot of questions about how a vacationing SEAL ended up dismantling a major trafficking operation." "I'll tell them what I told you," Caleb said. "I was walking my dog." Vargas stared at him for a long moment. Then something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "God, I missed you," she said. "Don't ever call me again." She walked away, barking orders into her radio. Caleb watched her go and felt something shift inside him, a door closing perhaps, or maybe one opening. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Somewhere in those colors, Caleb imagined he could see Martinez's face, smiling, approving, finally at rest. "What happens now?" Lauren asked. Caleb considered the question. A week ago, he would have said he didn't know. A week ago, he'd been a man running from himself, hiding in mountains, pretending the past couldn't find him. But the past had found him anyway. It had led him to a cave, to a woman who prayed when she should have screamed, to a fight he hadn't asked for, but couldn't refuse. And somehow, in the fighting, he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever. "Now," Caleb said slowly, "we go somewhere warm. Get some coffee. Let the dogs rest." He looked at her, and for the first time in months, his eyes held something other than grief. "And then we figure out what kind of people we want to be." Lauren nodded. "I think I'd like that." They walked toward the waiting helicopter, Phantom and Rex at their heels. The rotor blades began to spin, building toward flight, and the wind whipped around them like a promise. Behind them, Senator Harlan Whitaker was being loaded into an armored vehicle, his empire crumbling around him, his future measured in prison cells and courtrooms. Ahead of them, the sky opened wide and endless, full of possibilities neither of them could name, but both could feel. And in the space between past and future, between endings and beginnings, two broken soldiers and their faithful dogs took the first step towards something that felt almost like hope. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the mountain, away from the darkness of the mines, away from everything that had tried to destroy them. But Caleb knew the truth that soldiers always learn. Some battles end, others just change shape, and the ones worth fighting never really stop. The FBI safe house was supposed to be secure. Caleb knew something was wrong the moment the helicopter touched down. The agents waiting on the landing pad moved with the wrong rhythm, too tense, too watchful, hands drifting toward weapons that shouldn't need to be drawn for a routine handoff. "Something's off," he murmured to Lauren. She'd seen it too. "The one on the left, his earpiece. He keeps touching it like he's getting instructions." Phantom's hackles rose. That subtle warning Caleb had learned to trust more than any intelligence briefing. Rex pressed closer to Lauren's leg, his body coiling with the same tension. Commander Vargas noticed it a second later. Her hand went to her sidearm, her voice sharpening into command mode. "Hold positions. Nobody moves until I say so." The lead agent stepped forward, his smile too wide, too practiced. "Commander Vargas, we're here to take custody of the prisoners and secure the evidence. Standard protocol." Standard protocol would have you identifying yourself by name and badge number. Vargas's eyes were ice. "Try again." The agent's smile flickered. His hand moved toward his jacket. Caleb hit him before the weapon cleared the holster. The impact sent them both to the ground, and suddenly the landing pad erupted into chaos. Vargas's team moved with lethal precision, engaging the fake agents before they could coordinate. Gunfire cracked through the air, sharp and angry, and someone was shouting orders that nobody followed. Phantom launched himself at an agent who'd gotten behind Lauren, 70 pounds of fury driving the man into the concrete. Rex was there a heartbeat later, the two dogs working in tandem like they'd trained together for years instead of days. Caleb grappled with the lead agent, trading blows that would leave bruises for weeks. The man was trained, military or private security, someone who knew how to fight. But Caleb had spent 15 years learning how to end fights quickly, and he ended this one with an elbow strike that separated consciousness from ambition. The whole engagement lasted maybe 90 seconds. When the dust settled, 5 fake agents were on the ground. Vargas's team was securing the perimeter, and Caleb's lip was bleeding from a punch he hadn't seen coming. "They knew," Lauren breathed, her weapon still drawn, hands rock steady. "They knew exactly where we'd be." "Whitaker has people everywhere," Vargas said, holstering her sidearm, her face grim. "This safe house is compromised. We need to move. Now." "Where?" Caleb demanded. "If they can reach us here, they can reach us anywhere." Vargas was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call Caleb couldn't hear. When she hung up, something in her expression had changed. Harder, more determined. "I know a place," she said. "Off the grid, no official record. Even the Joint Chiefs don't know it exists." "And you do?" "Let's just say I've made some interesting friends over the years." Vargas gestured to her team. "Load up, we're going dark." They drove for 3 hours through back roads and logging trails, switching vehicles twice, until Caleb lost track of direction and distance. Phantom slept against his leg. the deep, trusting sleep of a dog who knew his partner would wake him if danger came. Rex dozed with his head in Lauren's lap, and she stroked his ears with the absent rhythm of someone whose thoughts were very far away. "You okay?" Caleb asked quietly. Lauren didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was rough. "I keep thinking about Jordan Hale, the kid in the jail. He gave us the information that led to all of this. And now—" She shook her head. "If Whitaker's people know we talked to him—" "Vargas's team is extracting him as we speak," Caleb said. "He'll be in protective custody within the hour." "And then what?" "He spends the rest of his life looking over his shoulder." Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He knew how these things worked. The deals, the relocations, the new identities that never quite fit. Some people rebuilt. Others never stopped running. "He made a choice," Caleb finally said. "He chose to talk when he could have stayed silent. That choice might save his life, or it might complicate it. But it was his choice." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be true." Lauren was quiet after that, her hands still moving through Rex's fur, her eyes fixed on something Caleb couldn't see. The safe house, if you could call it that, was a converted military bunker, buried in the mountains. The kind of place that had been built during the Cold War and forgotten by everyone, except the people who needed places to disappear. Vargas's interesting friends turned out to be a network of retired operators and intelligence officers who'd grown disillusioned with official channels and decided to create their own. "Welcome to the Shadow Registry," Vargas said as they descended into the bunker. "Unofficial motto, we don't exist, but we get things done." Caleb looked around at the equipment. Military-grade communications, surveillance arrays, enough computing power to hack a small country. "How long has this been here?" "Longer than either of us has been alive. Different names, different purposes. Right now, it's the only place in the country where Whitaker's reach can't touch us." "And you trust these people?" Vargas's smile was thin. "I trust that they hate corruption more than they love anything else. For our purposes, that's enough." The next 12 hours were a blur of debriefings, evidence analysis, and strategy sessions that felt more like war planning than law enforcement. The laptop from the mines contained everything: financial records, communication logs, a complete map of Whitaker's operations, spanning 3 continents and touching dozens of governments. It also contained something nobody expected. "Look at this." One of Vargas's analysts pulled up a document on the main screen. "We've been assuming Whitaker was the broker. He's not." Caleb leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Whitaker is a client, a major one, but still just a client. The actual broker, whoever that is referenced here only by a code name, Architect." The analyst scrolled through pages of data. Architect built this network from the ground up. Whitaker bought in 5 years ago, used the infrastructure to expand his trafficking operation, but he's been paying fees to Architect the entire time. "So, there's someone above Whitaker," Lauren said. "Someone with enough power to create this entire system and remain invisible while doing it." The analyst's face was troubled. "The really concerning part, there are references here to government contacts, not just local or state, federal, agency level." The room went silent. Lauren spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying the Architect has people inside the FBI, the CIA. I'm saying the Architect has people everywhere, and until we know who they are, we can't trust anyone outside this room." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd known this operation was big, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't a trafficking ring or even a smuggling network. This was infrastructure, a shadow government built inside the legitimate one, answering to no law except profit. "We need to find the Architect," Caleb said. "Everything else is just cutting branches. We need the root." "Agreed." Vargas stepped forward, arms crossed. "But here's the problem. Whitaker is the only person in custody who might know the Architect's identity, and Whitaker isn't talking." "Then we make him talk." "He's got lawyers, constitutional rights, a media circus building around his arrest. We can't just—" I don't mean torture. Caleb's voice was flat. I mean leverage. Everyone has something they care about more than themselves. We find Whitaker's pressure point. We push it. And if he doesn't have one? Caleb thought about the photographs in the mine, the careful poses, the networking smiles. Everyone has one. We just haven't looked hard enough. The answer came from an unexpected source. Jordan Hale arrived at the bunker the following morning, pale and shaking, but alive. He'd been extracted from county lockup 12 hours ahead of an accident that would have killed him. A guard paid to look the other way. A cell fire that would have been ruled equipment malfunction. They almost got me, Jordan said, his voice trembling. If your people had been 10 minutes later. But they weren't. Lauren sat across from him, her presence somehow both comforting and authoritative. You're safe now, Jordan, and I need you to think. Is there anything else you remember? Anything about Whitaker? About the people he worked with? Jordan shook his head. I told you everything. Vance handled the important stuff. I was just what? Just the driver. Jordan's eyes dropped. That's how I got into this. I needed money. My mom's medical bills were piling up, and Vance said he knew a guy who needed drivers, no questions. Good pay. I didn't know what I was driving until it was too late to say no. Caleb leaned forward. What were you driving? People. Mostly. Picking them up from one location, dropping them at another. I never saw their faces. They were always in the back, behind a partition. But I heard them sometimes. Jordan's voice cracked, crying, praying, speaking languages I didn't understand. Where did you take them? Different places, warehouses, a farm outside of town, once, this big estate up in the hills. Jordan paused, something flickering in his eyes. Whitaker's estate. Lauren glanced at Caleb. What happened at the estate? I don't know. I just dropped them off and left. But there was this woman. She came out to meet them. Not one of the people I was delivering. Someone who worked there, I think. She had this look, like she'd seen everything and stopped caring a long time ago. Can you describe her? Jordan closed his eyes, concentrating. Older, maybe 50s. Grey hair, cut short. She walked with a limp, like one leg was shorter than the other. And she called Whitaker something weird. Not Senator, not Harlan. She called him Junior. Caleb felt something click into place. Junior, like he was someone's son or protege. Vargas had been listening from the doorway. What if Whitaker isn't just a client of the architect? What if he's family? The implications rippled through the room. If Whitaker had a mentor, someone who'd raised him into this life, someone who'd built the network he'd inherited, then the architect wasn't a distant puppet master. The architect was personal. We need to find that woman, Caleb said. She's the connection. I might be able to help with that. Vargas pulled up surveillance footage on the main screen. This was captured 3 days ago at a private airfield outside Helena. Senator Whitaker's private plane, preparing for an unscheduled departure. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to show figures boarding the aircraft. One of them moved with a distinct limp. That's her, Jordan said immediately. That's the woman from the estate. Vargas zoomed in, running the image through facial recognition. The results came back in seconds. Evelyn Blackwood, Vargas read. 63 years old, former intelligence officer, retired from the CIA in 2002. Currently listed as deceased, killed in a car accident in 2008. She looked up. Except she's clearly not dead. A ghost, Caleb murmured. Someone erased her from the system and let her keep operating in the shadows. Not just someone. Vargas pulled up another document. Her handler at the CIA, the one who signed off on her operations for 15 years, was a man named Richard Whitaker, Harlan Whitaker's father. Died in 2010, officially a heart attack. Unofficially. She shrugged. I'm starting to think officially doesn't mean much in this family. The pieces were coming together now, forming a picture that was larger and darker than any of them had imagined. Richard Whitaker had built the network. Evelyn Blackwood had been his partner, possibly his protege. When Richard died, Harlan inherited the operation. But Blackwood remained the true architect, behind the throne. "She's been running this thing for decades," Lauren said softly, "and no one ever knew." "She's also the key to bringing it down," Caleb said. "Harlan won't talk because he's afraid of her, but if we can prove to him that she's going to be arrested, whether he cooperates or not, his only play is to give her up first." "That's a lot of ifs." "It's also our only shot." Vargas considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll reach out to some contacts. If Blackwood is alive and operating, she's left traces. We just have to find them." "How long?" "Give me 24 hours. It took 18. The trace came back to a compound in northern Idaho, private property, heavily secured, owned by a shell corporation that led through a maze of subsidiaries to a trust registered in the Cayman Islands. The same trust that had funded Harlan Whitaker's first Senate campaign. "She's there," Vargas confirmed. "Satellite imagery shows movement, vehicles, a security detail. Whatever she's doing, she's not hiding anymore." "She doesn't think she needs to hide." Caleb studied the imagery, his tactical mind already mapping approaches and vulnerabilities. "She thinks Harlan will protect her." "Will he?" "Not if we give him a better option." The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Caleb and a small team would hit the Idaho compound while Vargas's people simultaneously approached Whitaker with an offer: full immunity in exchange for testimony against Blackwood. It was a gamble. Whitaker might refuse. Blackwood might escape. A dozen things could go wrong. But doing nothing guaranteed failure. This way, at least they had a chance. Lauren found Caleb on the bunker's observation deck, staring out at the mountains with Phantom beside him. The dog's ears were relaxed, but his eyes tracked every movement, every shadow. "You're going after her," Lauren said. It wasn't a question. "Someone has to." "Let me come with you." Caleb turned to look at her. "You're not military. You're not trained for this kind of operation." "I'm trained enough. And Rex—" She glanced at the Malinois who had followed her up. "We've done tactical work before, not at your level, but we're not helpless." "I never said you were helpless." "Then why won't you let me help?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Martinez, about the last mission they'd run together, about the promises he'd made to himself when he watched his best friend die. "Because I've already lost one partner," he said finally. "I'm not losing another." Lauren's expression softened. "Caleb, you're not responsible for what happened to your friend. You're not responsible for protecting everyone you meet. I know that." He looked at her. "Do you?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because the truth was complicated in ways she didn't have words for. Lauren stepped closer. "I made my choice the moment I filed that report about the weapons cache. I knew it was dangerous. I knew there might be consequences. I did it anyway, because it was right. You don't get to take that choice away from me now." "I'm not trying to take anything away." "Then let me finish what I started." Her eyes held his, unwavering. "Let me see this through." Phantom looked up at Caleb. Rex looked up at Lauren. And something passed between all four of them, an understanding that went beyond words, beyond logic, beyond the careful calculations of risk and reward. "If things go bad," Caleb said slowly, "you follow my lead. No arguments, no hesitation." "Deal." Lauren nodded. "Deal." They shook hands, and Caleb felt something shift. A weight redistributing, a burden shared. He'd been carrying the mission alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone standing beside him. It felt like hope. The assault team assembled at 0400 hours. Caleb, Lauren, and 4 of Vargas's most trusted operators. Phantom and Rex would be with them. Their sense is an asset no technology could match. "Remember the objective," Vargas said during the final briefing. "Capture, not kill. Evelyn Blackwood is the only person who can unravel this network completely. Without her testimony, we're just cutting heads off a hydra." "And if she won't come quietly?" one of the operators asked. "Then we convince her." Vargas's smile held no warmth. "I have faith in Harlan's persuasive abilities." The helicopter lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, carrying them toward a confrontation that would either end the architect's reign or cost them everything. Caleb watched the mountains slide past below and thought about the cave, about the moment he'd chosen to step out of the shadows and back into the fight. He had told himself he was done being a soldier, done running toward danger. But some callings didn't accept resignations. Some purposes couldn't be buried, no matter how deep you dug the grave. Phantom shifted beside him, pressing warm and solid against his leg. The dog's eyes were bright, alert, ready. Caleb scratched behind his ears. "One more mission, buddy," he whispered. "Then we rest." Phantom's tail swept once across the helicopter floor. It was the only answer Caleb needed. The compound emerged from the darkness like a fortress rising from the earth, and somewhere inside it, the architect waited, unaware that judgment was coming, unaware that a Navy SEAL and his dog had decided she'd hurt enough people, unaware that this was the night her empire would fall. The helicopter touched down 1/2 mile from the compound, and Caleb was moving before the rotors stopped spinning. Phantom hit the ground beside him, body low, ears forward, every muscle coiled with purpose. Behind them, Lauren and Rex fell into formation, flanked by Vargas's 4 operators, each one a veteran of operations that would never appear in any official record. "Comms check," Caleb whispered. One by one, the team responded. "All systems green. Remember the objective. Blackwood alive. Everyone else is secondary." Caleb's eyes swept the darkness ahead. "Stay tight, stay quiet. And if I give the pullback signal, you pull back. No arguments." Nobody argued. They moved through the night like shadows given purpose, closing the distance to the compound with the patient efficiency of predators who knew their prey wasn't going anywhere. Phantom ranged ahead, his nose reading the air for threats, his body language feeding Caleb a constant stream of information that no technology could replicate. 200 meters out, Phantom froze. Caleb dropped to a knee, fist raised. The team halted instantly. "What is it, boy?" Phantom's head turned slightly to the right, his focus locked on something in the darkness. Caleb followed his gaze and saw it. A brief flash of movement, a shadow separating from shadows. Patrol, single guard, armed. Caleb signaled to the operator on his left, Jackson, a former Delta Force sniper with hands steady enough to thread a needle in a hurricane. Jackson nodded once and disappeared into the darkness. 30 seconds later, he reappeared. The guard didn't. "Perimeter's thinner than expected," Jackson murmured. "Either she's confident, or she's already gone." "Or it's a trap," Lauren added quietly. "Only one way to find out." Caleb rose from his crouch. "Move!" They breached the outer fence through a gap that Phantom found, a section where the wire had been cut and hastily repaired, suggesting someone had used this entrance before. Inside, the compound revealed itself as a collection of buildings arranged around a central structure, all of them dark, except for one. Light spilled from the windows of the main building, like a beacon or a challenge. "She knows we're coming," Caleb realized. "Then let's not keep her waiting." The front door was unlocked. That bothered Caleb more than locked would have. They cleared the first 3 rooms in textbook fashion, quick, efficient, finding nothing but empty furniture and the lingering smell of recently burned paper. Someone had been destroying documents, someone who knew the end was near. Phantom's head snapped toward a door at the end of the hallway. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just stood there, rigid, every hair on his body telling Caleb that whatever waited beyond that door was the reason they'd come. "Stack up," Caleb breathed. The team positioned themselves. Lauren and Rex took the rear, providing cover. Caleb's hand found the door handle. He pushed it open. Evelyn Blackwood sat behind a mahogany desk, her hands folded, her expression calm. She was exactly as Jordan had described. Grey hair cut short, features sharp with intelligence, eyes that had seen decades of shadows and learned to live in them. A cane leaned against her chair, explaining the limp. "Lieutenant Commander Harlan," her voice was smooth, almost warm. "I wondered when you'd find me. Took you longer than I expected." Caleb stepped into the room, Phantom at his heel. The team spread out behind him, weapons trained on the woman who had built an empire on human misery. Evelyn Blackwood, also known as the Architect. "You're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 24 other charges I'll let the lawyers sort out. Arrest? Blackwood smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had stopped being afraid a very long time ago. How charmingly optimistic. She tilted her head slightly. Tell me, Commander, do you really think I've survived this long by allowing myself to be arrested? I think you've run out of options. Have I? Her hand moved toward the desk drawer, and suddenly every weapon in the room was pointed at her. Relax, I'm just reaching for my insurance policy. She pulled out a small device, a remote trigger, Caleb realized, his blood going cold, the kind used to detonate explosives. The building is wired, Blackwood said casually. Enough C4 to reduce everything within 100 meters to rubble. I press this button. We all die. Very democratic, really. Caleb's mind raced. You're bluffing. Am I? Blackwood's thumb hovered over the trigger. I've spent 40 years building something extraordinary, a system that moves money, people, and power across borders without leaving fingerprints. Do you really think I'd let it end with handcuffs and a courtroom? I think you want to live. Everyone wants to live, Commander, but some of us have learned that there are things worth dying for. Her eyes hardened. And things worth killing for. Lauren stepped forward, and Caleb's heart lurched. Officer Voss, stay back. No. Lauren's voice was steady, her gaze locked on Blackwood. I spent 3 days tied to a stake, waiting to burn because of you. Because you decided my life was worth less than your secrets. You don't get to threaten me again. Blackwood studied her with something that might have been curiosity. The police officer, I read your file, dedicated, principled, naive. You actually believed the system would protect you. The system didn't protect me. Lauren's chin lifted. He did. She nodded toward Caleb, a stranger who had no reason to help, who'd spent months trying to disappear from the world. He heard me praying, and he came anyway. How touching. And now you're both going to die in an underground bunker because you were too stubborn to walk away. Maybe. Lauren took another step forward, and Rex moved with her, his body tense but controlled. Or maybe you're the one who's afraid. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. I'm not afraid of anything. Then why are you holding that trigger? Lauren's voice softened. Why not just press it? End it all right now. You could have detonated the moment we walked in, but you didn't. You wanted to talk first. You wanted us to know how clever you are, how powerful you've been. You wanted an audience. Careful, officer. No, I'm done being careful. Lauren's chin lifted higher. You're not a mastermind. You're a lonely old woman who built a castle out of other people's pain, because it was the only way you could feel important. And now that castle is falling down, and you don't know how to live in a world where you're not in control. Blackwood's composure cracked, just for a second, just a flash of something raw and wounded behind the mask. You don't know anything about me. I know you had a family once, Richard Whittaker. He wasn't just your handler, was he? He was more than that. Lauren pressed harder. And when he died, you lost the only person who ever saw you as human. So you turned his son into your puppet and told yourself it was legacy, but really, it was just grief. Stop. Harlan doesn't respect you. He fears you. That's not the same thing. And somewhere deep down, you know it. I said stop. You've spent 40 years surrounded by people who work for you, and not a single one of them would mourn if you died tonight. Is that really the life you wanted? Is that really... Blackwood's hand slammed against the desk. Enough! The word echoed through the room, and in that moment of raw emotion, Phantom moved. The dog launched himself, not at Blackwood, but at the desk, his jaws closing around the remote trigger and ripping it from her hand before she could react. He landed, spun, and delivered the device to Caleb with the precision of 1,000 training exercises. Blackwood stared at the empty space where her leverage had been. Her face went white. How? He's a combat dog, Caleb said quietly, securing the trigger. He's been trained to disarm explosives, identify threats, and protect his handler. But more than that, he's been trained to watch. And he watched you, Miss Blackwood. He saw that you were holding that trigger too tight, like you were afraid of it, like you didn't really want to use it. You can't know that. I trust him more than I trust anything else in this world. Caleb stepped forward, and his team moved with him, surrounding Blackwood's desk. It's over. Whatever you built, whatever you believed you were protecting, it ends tonight. Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Her shoulders slumped, and suddenly she looked every one of her 63 years. You don't understand, she said finally. This wasn't about money. It was never about money. Then what was it about? Control. The word came out hollow, exhausted. Richard and I, we saw what chaos could do. We lived through it. Cold War, proxy wars, regimes falling and taking millions of innocent people with them. We told ourselves we could build something better, a system that operated outside the mess of politics, that could move resources where they were needed without the bureaucracy and the corruption. You trafficked human beings. We moved people across borders when their governments would have killed them. Blackwood's voice hardened. In the beginning, refugees, dissidents, scientists whose knowledge would have been weaponized by dictators. We saved lives. And then? Blackwood was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. And then we realized how much money there was in moving other things, other people. And somewhere along the line, we stopped being the solution and became part of the problem. You knew, Caleb said. You knew what you'd become, and you kept going. Because stopping meant admitting we'd been wrong. And if we'd been wrong, her eyes glistened. Then all those years, all those sacrifices, all those people we convinced ourselves we were helping, it was all for nothing. The room was silent. Even Phantom had gone still, sensing the weight of the moment. It wasn't all for nothing, Lauren said quietly, but it wasn't enough to justify what you did after. Nothing is. Blackwood looked at her, and for a moment, something like recognition passed between them. Two women who had devoted their lives to systems they believed in. One who had held to her principles, and one who had let them slip away. You're right, Blackwood whispered. I know you're right. She reached for her desk drawer again, and this time Caleb didn't stop her. She pulled out a small key and held it up. There's a safe deposit box in Geneva. This key opens it. Inside you'll find everything. Names, dates, account numbers, every deal we ever made, every person we ever moved. It's my insurance policy, in case Harlan ever tried to cut me out. A bitter laugh. I suppose it's yours now. Caleb took the key. Why are you giving us this? Because she's right. Blackwood nodded toward Lauren. I'm tired. I've been tired for a long time. And maybe... She hesitated. Maybe this is how I finally stop running. The arrest was quiet. No drama. No resistance. Evelyn Blackwood walked out of her compound in handcuffs, flanked by Vargas's operators. Her face, a mask of exhaustion and something that might have been relief. Caleb watched her go and felt something complicated moving through his chest. Not satisfaction, not pity, something in between. She had been a monster, yes, but she had also been human, which was somehow worse. You okay? Lauren appeared at his side, Rex pressing against her leg. I don't know. Caleb looked down at Phantom, who was watching the departing vehicles with his usual patient vigilance. I thought catching her would feel like a victory. Instead, it just feels heavy. That's because it is heavy. Lauren's hand found his arm. She's not a movie villain. She's a real person who made real choices that hurt real people. The weight is appropriate. When did you get so wise? About 3 days after I almost burned to death in a cave. Her smile was tired, but genuine. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying things. They stood in silence as the last vehicle disappeared down the access road, carrying the architect away from her empire forever. What happens now? Lauren asked. Now we go home. Let the lawyers and the politicians sort out the mess. Try to remember what normal feels like. Do you remember what normal feels like? Caleb considered the question. No, but I'm starting to think maybe that's okay. The flight back took longer than the flight in, or maybe it just felt that way. Caleb sat with Phantom's head in his lap, his fingers moving absently through the dog's fur, his mind processing everything that had happened. Martinez would have loved this mission. He would have been the first one through the door, the last one to celebrate, the guy making jokes while everyone else was still catching their breath. His absence was a wound that would never fully heal. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some wounds weren't supposed to heal. Maybe they were supposed to remind you of what mattered. Hey, Lauren's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Look. She pointed out the window, where the first light of dawn was painting the horizon in shades of gold and rose. After everything, the darkness of the mines, the chaos of the compound, the weight of Blackwood's confession, the sunrise felt like a promise. Beautiful, Caleb murmured. Yeah. Lauren leaned her head against his shoulder. It is. Phantom's tail swept once across Caleb's leg. Rex sighed contentedly. And somewhere below them, the world kept turning, imperfect and broken, but somehow still worth fighting for. The trials took 18 months. Senator Harlan Whitaker was convicted on 47 counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, and corruption. He received 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. In his final statement to the court, he refused to show remorse, claiming he had been serving a higher purpose. Nobody believed him. Evelyn Blackwood pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for full cooperation. Her testimony brought down networks on 4 continents, leading to the arrest of over 200 co-conspirators, including 3 foreign diplomats, a deputy director of a major intelligence agency, and a shipping magnate who had been on Forbes's billionaire list for 15 years. She was sentenced to 40 years. She would die in prison. Jordan Hale received a reduced sentence of 5 years in exchange for his testimony and cooperation. His mother's medical bills were paid by an anonymous donor who nobody could quite identify, though Caleb noticed that Commander Vargas seemed particularly satisfied whenever the subject came up. The Shadow Registry continued its work, invisible and essential, a safety net for operations that official channels couldn't touch. Vargas offered Caleb a permanent position. He said he'd think about it. As for Caleb himself, he stood on the porch of his cabin, watching the sunset paint the Montana mountains in colors that seemed impossible outside of dreams. Phantom lay at his feet, older now, but still alert, still watching, still ready. A truck rumbled up the access road, and Caleb smiled. Lauren climbed out, Rex jumping down beside her. She looked different than she had 18 months ago, stronger, more settled. The shadows in her eyes replaced by something that looked like peace. "You're late," Caleb called. "Traffic." She climbed the porch steps and settled into the chair beside him. "Also, I stopped to get this." She pulled a bottle of wine from her bag, nothing fancy, just something local. Caleb accepted it with a nod. "How's the new job?" Lauren had been promoted to detective 6 months after the trials ended, assigned to a federal task force focused on human trafficking. It was hard work, important work, the kind of work that left marks. Busy, rewarding, sometimes both at the same time. She scratched behind Rex's ears. "We shut down a smuggling operation out of Seattle last week. 18 victims recovered, all of them alive." "Good." "Yeah, it was." She turned to look at him. "How about you? Still thinking about Vargas's offer?" Caleb had been thinking about it every day, actually. The pull of purpose, the weight of capability, the knowledge that he could make a difference if he chose to. But he'd also been thinking about other things, about peace, about rest, about what it meant to build a life instead of just surviving one. "I told her yes," he said finally. Lauren's eyebrows rose. "Really?" "Part-time consulting basis. I'll help with the stuff that needs my particular skill set. But I'm not going back to full-time operations." He looked at Phantom, who had lifted his head at the shift in conversation. "We've earned the right to slow down." Phantom's tail swept the porch boards. Agreement. "And the rest of the time?" Caleb smiled. "I was thinking about starting a training program. Working dogs, handlers, the whole package. There's a lot of veterans out there who don't know what to do with themselves after they come home. I figured maybe I could help some of them find what I found. Purpose. Connection. Something worth getting up for in the morning." He turned to meet her eyes. someone to walk beside. Lauren held his gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled. That real smile. The one that made her look like she'd just discovered a secret. "I'd like that," she said. They sat together as the sun continued its descent. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and decided to walk toward the light. Phantom and Rex settled at their feet, shoulders touching, partners in ways that transcended species or circumstance. The world outside still held shadows. There would always be caves and fires and people who chose cruelty over kindness. That was the nature of things. But there would also always be people who chose differently, who heard screams in the darkness and moved toward them instead of away, who refused to let fire write the final chapter. Caleb thought about Martinez, about all the friends he'd lost, about the years he'd spent running from grief and finding only more emptiness. He thought about the night in the cave, the moment he'd heard Lauren praying, the choice he'd made to step out of the shadows. That choice had cost him his peace, his solitude, his carefully constructed walls. It had given him everything else. "Hey," Lauren said softly. "Yeah? Thank you for not walking away." Caleb reached down and scratched behind Phantom's ears. The dog's eyes closed in contentment, and for just a moment, everything was exactly as it should be. "Thank him," Caleb said. "He's the one who heard you first." Lauren laughed, a real laugh, full and bright and alive. And somewhere in that sound, Caleb found something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The miracle in this story isn't that the bad guys lost or that the good guys won. Miracles like that happen in movies, and life is messier than movies. The miracle is quieter than that. It's a man who tried to bury his heart under years of silence, discovering that some things refuse to stay buried. It's two dogs who should have been enemies, standing shoulder to shoulder like old friends. It's a prayer whispered in a cave, heard by someone who wasn't supposed to be listening. And it's dawn arriving without fanfare or applause, simply because that's what dawn does. Steady, certain proof that darkness never gets the final word. Most of us will never face a cave or a burning stake, but we all face our own darkness, our own moments when it would be easier to walk away than to step forward. The lesson is simple. When you can't fix the whole world, be faithful in your corner of it. When you hear someone calling for help, answer. And when a good dog tells you something is wrong, trust him. Because sometimes God doesn't send angels. Sometimes he sends a Navy SEAL and a German Shepherd who decided that today wasn't a good day for anyone to die. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you've ever witnessed a quiet miracle in your own life, we'd love to hear about it. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and remember that every day is a chance to be the person who steps out of the shadows when someone needs help. May God bless you and keep you. May he guard your loved ones and every faithful companion who walks beside you. May he heal the wounds that nobody sees and give you courage when the night feels long. And may his peace rest on you like dawn, quiet, certain, and always, always new.